here to break down everything Canelo versus Munguia and also UFC 301. It was an exciting night of combat sports last night. What do you want to start with, Anthony?
We get into it with UFC 301.
Alrighty. So in the main event, we had Steve Erceg take on Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja was victorious by unanimous decision. This was a very competitive back-and-forth contest. We're going to have a lot to talk about in this one. My scorecard read 2-2 going into the fifth round. I thought this was a really close fight, and Erceg even could have won if he didn't make a mistake in the last 30 seconds going for a takedown and getting reversed. I really thought that cost him the round, and not only that, but the fight. And it reflected so on the judges' scorecards with 248-47s going to Pantoja. I was really impressed with Steve Erceg. I thought that his skills are elite. He showed that he's one of the top 5 flyweights in the world right now. And there's a lot of very exciting matchups for him on the horizon. What did you make of Steve Erceg's shot at the title? And the overall, what were your thoughts on the main event?
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you said. I had a 2-2 head into the fifth. I think ultimately Steve Erceg's takedown attempt in the fifth cost him the fight. I don't know why he would do that. If you're Steve Erceg, you want to keep that fight on the feet and not on the ground. That allowed Pantoja to get the ground control and control the fifth, which is ultimately what led him to win the fight. But yeah, Steve Erceg was definitely very impressive. He definitely had everything in him to win the fight. I think he might be the first guy we ever see who comes off of a loss and sky ups up the rankings. Honestly, I think, that fight was much closer than Roy Val's fight with Pantoja. And I wouldn't be mad if you could sit there and say Erceg is the second best flyweight in the UFC right now. He's got a bright future, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him fighting for the title maybe in a year or two if he gets a couple more wins under his belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And if he comes back against someone like a Manel Kape or even a Brandon Royval and finishes them in impressive fashion, he might be next for the title again. It was that close of a fight that we saw on Saturday night. And we've really been talking about the depth of this division and, the new blood since Demetrius Johnson and the titles turned over through Moreno and Figueiredo and now to Pantoja. Is there anyone else that you really want to see and think needs that title opportunity again before Erceg?
Yeah, obviously, me and you had talked about it plenty of times before. We've been saying Albazi, but unfortunately he got a neck injury. He's expected to come back in September. Now, I know Pantoja said he wants to take some time off, maybe kind of let this settle out and shake up and see who's going to be the number one contender. Honestly, I know they were, upset with Muhammad Mokaya's performance, even though he won. I would like to see him let, Albazi get healthy and let Albazi and Mokaya fight in the number one contenders match in September. Give the winner of that the next title shot, get some new blood for Pantoja. And then, like you said, let Roy Val and Steve Erceg fight, both guys who lost to Pantoja. Let's see who's the best guy and most deserving of a rematch.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And, that sets up kind of a semifinal situation for them, like a 4-man race to get that next title shot. I like that idea a lot. So as far as the main event's concerned, how did you have the fight scored? Was it you scored it 3-2 for Pantoja as well?
Yeah, I had a 2-2 heading into the fifth. I know some people were saying it was 3-1, but I had it 2-2. I thought, Pantoja definitely won round one. And then I thought 2, 3, and 4 was pretty close, but I gave Erceg 2 of those 3. So ultimately it came down to that fifth round, and I had to go with Pantoja ultimately. But Erceg did everything he could to win the fight, and if he would have kept it on the feet and maybe got some more strikes, maybe he could have won this fight.
Yeah, and when he was on the feet, he really impressed. Those elbows split Pantoja open on 2 separate occasions. Pantoja would kind of dart inside to either land punches or go for takedown attempts, and Erceg was catching him coming in with really sharp elbows that were a huge story in the fight. Had Pantoja leaking there for the final 3 rounds, and looked like Erceg was mounting a comeback there in the second half of the fight. I thought that he answered a lot of questions concerning his cardio, and going 5 rounds, he looked to be in tremendous shape. I don't think that's a problem. He actually got better, in my opinion, as the fight went on, other than that mistake in the 5th round, obviously. But I think that was more of a mental error than a fatigue situation for sure. But yeah, I was really impressed with Steve Erceg, and Pantoja proved himself as a true champion defending his belt at home.
Yeah, Pantoja is going to be a tough out for any fighter trying to win the title. And, I think he's going to hold the title for a long time. And for Steve Erceg to only be in the UFC for about a year, less than a year, and to already be this close at beating a guy like Pantoja is nothing short of impressive. And I'm really impressed with Steve Erceg, and I think he's going to be right back in the spot really soon.
Yeah, I agree. So in the co-main event, we had Jonathan Martinez taking on UFC Hall of Famer Jose Aldo, who was returning from a 2-year absence. We hadn't seen him since he fought and lost to Merab Dvalishvili, who obviously is doing great things now in his own right. But Aldo returned in Rio this weekend in the co-main event. And I got to tell you, I don't think Jonathan Martinez put on his best showing in this one. I was really disappointed with the output from Martinez. We saw his leg kicks in his fight with Adrian Yanez and how he was able to take that fight over. He didn't even get that going at all. He really threw one leg kick in that first round. Aldo blocked it, and he didn't really seem like he wanted to go after that path to victory. But on the feet, he got outboxed. He fought at Aldo's game in a boxing range and was eating big shots while he didn't really land much of his own. He looked disappointed after the fight and was crying, and it was the biggest moment of his career. Honestly, I think that he struggled a little bit with the bright lights, the fighting on enemy territory. There was 10,000 Brazilian fans screaming Aldo's name in there, and that's got to be a lot of pressure. But Martinez was on a 6-fight win streak against top-level guys like Yanez and Nurmagomedov. So this one was really surprising to me. Did it surprise you?
Yeah, I was 100% surprised. I couldn't have been more wrong. My prediction coming this fight was that Martinez was going to get an early knockout. As disappointed as we can be in Martinez, we should be equally as impressed with Jose Aldo. I mean, for him to come in here at his age and be able to compete the way he did, he looked sharp and efficient. I thought he outboxed Martinez most of the fight. I thought he won all 3 rounds, 3-0. And, you don't see guys his age being able to compete with the young guys at, those types of divisions. So I was very impressed by Jose Aldo. You don't see guys, we've seen with Henry Cejudo, when he had a couple years off, he didn't look the same. But I thought Jose Aldo looked great. I know they're talking about him skipping the line for a title shot. Obviously, I think Merab definitely deserves the next shot. But, hey, I think, Jose Aldo, with his name and what he's accomplished and how great he looked in this fight, I would like to see him maybe fight an older veteran bantamweight, like maybe like a Peter Yan or a Figueiredo or Cejudo. If he gets that one, then I think we could be talking about him fighting for a title shot in 2025. But I'm more impressed with Jose Aldo, and I think this fight has more to do with what Jose Aldo did than, what Martinez didn't do.
Absolutely. And, no, I agree with that 100%. Aldo rose to the occasion there and put on a legendary veteran performance for sure. What were you saying before that? There was a point I was going to make off of what you were saying about Aldo.
They were saying title shot with him, and obviously we know Merab's going to get the next title shot. Yeah.
I think a title shot after, like I was saying, Merab was his last defeat, and as you're pointing out, Merab's now positioned for that next shot. You got to give it to Merab. But I liked what you said with Henry Cejudo. I think that should be his next opponent. Get 2 veterans in there, striker versus grappler. Both these guys had a little bit of an extended layoff. Huge fan bases, each of them. The Mexican fan base with Henry Cejudo, and then the Brazilian fans with Jose Aldo. You could put that in a main event of a fight night or on any pay-per-view, and people would be very excited to see that matchup. I think that's where I want to see Aldo next, is against Henry Cejudo. I'm interested to see where they put him in the rankings here this week. I believe he'll be inside the top 10. Martinez was 12th. I think that the performance was pretty done. To throw him right back into the top 10. Wasn't too much. But yeah, I thought it was a great performance by Aldo. I want to see him fight Cejudo next and to get to top 10 ranking tomorrow.
Yeah, I know Chito Vera called him out. I wouldn't mind that as well, but I would like to see him, like you said, fight an older guy like Cejudo. Now, what makes it really interesting is this was the last fight of his contract for Jose Aldo. So the question is where they go from here. Obviously, if he would have lost or not looked too good, that would have been a pretty easy, just let him retire. But now he looks so good that he's definitely going to demand, a bigger contract. And it's going to be interesting to see how those contract negotiations go.
Yeah, they're definitely going to bring him back. I foresee them maybe getting him to a 3-fight deal. I think that he's probably got 3 good fights left in him. Give him one more contenders matchup, and then we'll see where he wants to go off that. But you know, really good to me. Didn't look like someone that was over the hill. A lot of the times with these strikers that aged, you know, the speed goes first and then the reaction time. If we look at like Dominic Cruz or Frankie Edgar or some guys like that, you know, he looked tremendous. The chin held up as well. No problems there. So I'm interested to see what he does in the future. Also, another surprise that we had, this one really shocked me. My best bet of the week was Vitor Petrino by knockout. And, you know, kind of a mental mistake. We talked about Erceg's mental mistake going for the takedown in the championship fight, but this one really hurt Petrino. Goes for a takedown attempt while Anthony Smith was shelled up, taking big shots, and you know, dove right into a standing guillotine and then tried to slam Smith. Even was going to the ground. Smith tightened up that guillotine choke once it hit the ground, and finished Petrino off inside his native country in Brazil. Took his undefeated 0 and put a 1 on that professional loss column. Was this the biggest win of Anthony Smith's career?
It's definitely got to be up there for sure. You know, definitely when everybody calling him out, you know, everybody thought, you know, this was going to be his last, you know, huge fight. He was going to be outside the top 10, maybe outside the top 15. But, you know, he, you know, bounced back. You know, he keeps himself inside the top 10. And it goes to show you how cruel of a sport MMA can really be. You know, a guy like Victor Petrino doing everything absolutely right, looking like he's on his way to winning the fight, makes one little mistake, and that's it. There goes your one, you know, loss, you know, a little longer undefeated. But, you know, he's young, especially for the division that he's in. He's super young. I think he's going to bounce back. You know, he'll learn from his rookie mistakes. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see Victor Petrino with the talent he has to be right back in this position. You know, I do think he deserves maybe another ranked fighter again. You know, Anthony Smith's a top 10 fighter for a reason. Maybe give him a guy just inside the top 15 to let him bounce back on. But I'm definitely very happy for Anthony Smith, and he definitely needed this fight a lot more. And I'm glad that we get to keep him in the top 10. And, you know, who knows what he's going to do with this one. You know, who knows where he goes from here.
Yeah, huge for Smith. He's going to be up there in a ranked fight. I like what you're saying about Petrino. He's one of the top fighters I've seen at light heavyweight in a couple years. And this was really surprising to me. Just, you know, kind of having the fight where you won it early. You had, I'm not saying Smith was rocked. Smith has a great chin, but he was shelling up there. And the damage to the blows Petrino was throwing were obvious. You know, Smith was backing up and shelling up. And that was just a really big mental mistake by a young fighter. And Petrino learns from that going ahead in the future. Because really that was one of the only ways he could have lost the fight, was going in reckless like that and getting submitted. So, you know, it's kind of alarming to me. You know, I don't know really what his coaches were thinking. I can't believe they told him to go in there and shoot for takedowns once you have him hurt. But, you know, we'll see how Petrino responds to this one. I want to see Smith come back, you know, here against somebody of value. You know, he doesn't have many fights left in his career. Some people were saying if he lost to Petrino, it would have been the last ride this weekend. But I think that this win might have reinvigorated him a little bit, maybe brought some energy back into his career. So he might want to go on one more title run after this, after just beating, you know, one of the most talented prospects in the division. Do you think Anthony Smith has one last title run in him?
I mean, as impressive as this win is, I think it only goes so far. You know, maybe he might be able to get one more win in, but I don't think he's going to get another title shot. You know, the only way it possibly could happen is with him being such a marketable name. You know, maybe if he gets one more win, he may be able to skip the line just because of his name and, you know, because the light heavyweight division doesn't have a lot of remarkable people. And, you know, and Alex Pereira is looking for a guy to fight with, so maybe because of that. But honestly, I don't see it. For our next opponent for him, maybe you'd like to see him get like a rematch to one of the guys that beat him. Maybe like a Johnny Walker, get like his rematch. You know, see if Anthony Smith has improved since the last time he fought Johnny Walker. You know, maybe if he gets that one, maybe he can get another title shot. But at this point in his career, I don't see it at this point.
Yeah, he's got losses to a lot of names at the top of the division: Alexander Rakic, Khalil Roundtree, Johnny Walker, and Magomed Ankalaev. So matching him up in a rematch might have to be what happens here going forward. So that'll be something to look out for sure going forward with Smith. Is there a name that you'd like to see him against?
Yeah, I'd like to see him rematch Johnny Walker.
Johnny Walker. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Johnny Walker's been struggling a little bit, and Smith needs to probably take that fight to the ground if it happens. But I wouldn't mind seeing that. I'd like to see him against some fresh blood up there. We'd have to pull up the rankings to see specifically, who he hasn't competed against next. But also on this card, we had Michel Pereira finish a fight in very short order. This was one of the most impressive finishes on this card. Subbed Ihor Potieria in 54 seconds into the first round. Potieria really didn't get anything going in this contest. Took some big shots on the feet and then also got standing guillotined and fell back unconscious as the ref broke it up. This was kind of a brutal submission. Pereira normally comes in dancing, very excited, but he seemed focused coming into this matchup, which, obviously played in his favor with him getting the victory so easily. I didn't know what they were going to do there at the end with the somersault, him kneeing him in the head when they went back to the replay. It looked like potentially they could overturn that to a no contest due to that being a foul, but they ended up deciding to stay with the submission. They might take that to an athletic commission in the future and get that reviewed, and see if Potieria can get a no contest in that situation. But very impressive by Michel Pereira coming in there and getting the submission.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed. And Michel Pereira, always does things that I've never seen before. And I definitely didn't see that somersault coming. And I think the reason why it wasn't a no contest was because I don't think he made contact with the head or face. I think when he did the flip, the knee just missed and hit more closer to the chest. Thank God it did, because if it hit the head, that definitely would have been a no contest. And I think he'll definitely learn from that. Thank God this wasn't against a ranked opponent or anything like that. He got to impress the fans in front of his hometown in Brazil. The only thing that upsets me with Michel Pereira is because, everybody knows on an 8-fight win streak, he should have been fighting a ranked opponent in this weight class. And it seems like he likes to keep fighting lower tier guys and he's picking off guys just to keep winning. And I think at this point, the UFC is going to step in and make him fight at least a ranked opponent, because he can't just keep fighting guys outside and just having quick first round, finishes. He's got to fight a guy within the top 15, maybe like a Paul Craig or a Chris Curtis. But I definitely think he's got to fight a ranked opponent next.
Yeah, and at 185 pounds, there's a lot of guys there. I actually am interested in this matchup coming up in St. Louis between Buckley and how do you pronounce his name? Nurbilov. That guy is like 37-8, and Joaquin Buckley is obviously an athlete. Sure, I wouldn't mind seeing Pereira fight the winner of that, and in potentially a matchup that gets someone ranked. But yeah, I think Pereira is in need of a step up in competition. I think that he should face the winner of that Buckley matchup, like I was saying, coming up this weekend. Ruzabov, I'm sorry, his name's pronounced Ruzabov. And, Pereira's fantastic. I thought Potieria was a little bit in over his head. He's a guy who's been finished already twice in the UFC coming in. So do you think that this is the UFC kind of slow playing him, or do you think it's Pereira and his management taking these fights outside of the rankings?
I think it's him and his management team. Given his age and how many fights he's won, I think the UFC definitely wanted him to have a ranked fighter. I think particularly in this one, they definitely want him to have a ranked fighter. But him coming off of a fight not that long ago, he really wanted to rush himself into Brazil. So I think that's why the UFC was okay with letting him fight one more guy not ranked in front of his home country. But I think at this point, the UFC is going to step in and make him fight a ranked opponent. Now, when you mentioned Buckley versus Romanov, Romanov's like 6'5". I know he normally fights at middleweight, and it's crazy that he's going to step down to 170 to fight Buckley. Now that's interesting because that's going to be a tough weight cut for him. I'm not sure if Buckley's going to move back up to 185. But if Nuzulov wins that fight and goes back up to 185, I would love to see him and Pereira fight at 185. That'd be a tremendous fight. Two guys on tremendous winning streaks and two guys just outside the rank, top 15.
Yeah, and I was under the impression that was a middleweight fight. Thanks for bringing that up, because Ruzabov is 6'5", and that's really what stuck out to me. I think he's going to win this weekend against Buckley, which I thought would set him up perfectly with a fight with Pereira. Both of those guys are very athletic, long frames. But yeah, since he's moving down to welterweight, then that fight's off the table. But I thought that'd be an interesting matchup for sure. And Buckley's seen some fights in the middleweight division as well, but is now on that nice win streak down at welterweight, which puts him in the co-main event this weekend. But Yeah, Pereira really impressed in front of his crowd. He's all action all the time. I love the antics. I like the, even though they may lead to like disqualifications against Diego Sanchez, like we've seen in the things like that, or or losses to Tristan Connolly that he shouldn't have had. But Pereira goes in there and really is exciting. One of my cousins was sitting there watching the fight, and when he did the backflip, my 9-year-old cousin was like, "Oh my gosh!" So he's bringing new fans and new eyes to the sport every single time he comes in there and performs. So, I really like Michel Pereira and what he brings from an entertainment value to the company, but I agree he needs a step up in competition. So starting off this main card, though, Kai Borralho did get a step up in competition, taking on Paul Craig, former light heavyweight, who has now been at the middleweight division for about 3 fights. Paul came into this one with a submission loss to Brendan Allen. He was a huge underdog at the betting sports books. Borralho gets this one done by knockout. He actually called it before the fight. We were talking a little bit about grapplers going against one another. Normally when that happens, the fight stays on the feet. In this one, Borralho didn't look like he wanted to go to the ground with Craig at all. He might have had an advantage on the ground, but he played it so smart, not playing into Craig's only chance to win and his strengths. Took Craig's strengths away from him, made him fight on the feet, and got that huge knockout. Craig's head bounces off the cage, and he lands unconscious. I really liked this fight. I liked Borralho's performance, and it's exactly what he should have done if he wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, and I said coming into this fight, I think the 185 division is the best division and the deepest division all of UFC. And I think Borralho was right up there, one of the best up-and-comers in that division. He really impressed me. He was walking down Craig the whole fight, leading to the knockout win. Paul Craig is a veteran. He's a great fighter. But I think he's much better served at light heavyweight. He beat a lot of great fighters at light heavyweight. And it seems like he's not beating the same level of fighters and fighting the same way, at middleweight. I think given his height and his age, I think he should go back up to light heavyweight. But Borralho is great. He called out Jared Cannonier for his next fight. And I definitely think with his talent and his win streak, he definitely warrants a guy, if not Cannonier, maybe a Brandon Allen, another guy who's up-and-comer. But he definitely deserves a guy, I think, inside the top 10. And I think the sky's the limit for Borralho.
Yeah, I think that Jared Cannonier matchup is just a perfect one. You got 2 physically imposing athletes, just great physiques on both guys. Borralho's the grappler. Cannonier can get it done in a lot of ways. We see him get wins with ground and pound like he did against Derek Brunson. Or he can stand on the feet and trade like he did with Sean Strickland in getting that split decision victory as well. So I really like Cannonier. I think he's a very strong athlete. And his strength plays to his advantage a lot in his fights. Borralho is going to want to take that fight to the ground. I think that's really an intriguing matchup and what should be next for Borralho. And that's something you could put on a co-main event or even the main event of a fight night.
Yeah, Cannonier is a great, top contender as well. He's beat a lot of great fighters. In his last fight, he absolutely destroyed Vettori. He has a win over Sean Strickland. If Borralho goes out and beat Cannonier, he's going to put his name in the hat for a title contention. And I really think that's what his potential and his talent warrants at this point.
Yep, I think so as well. So when we look at the prelims here, we had a couple finishes. We had a couple interesting fights. Jack Shore versus Joe Anderson Brito ended by doctor stoppage due to that leg kick. That was a nasty injury that happened there on the check of the legs with Jack Shore. It looked like the ringside physician could even almost put his finger inside the hole in his leg. What do you make of that matchup? Brito looked good for as long as the fight lasted. I thought that he was winning the fight regardless of injury. Now, Jack Shore is tough, and that was really heating up before it got stopped. But is that the fight that stuck out to you on the prelims?
Yeah, I thought that was a very, very close fight up until that cut. Like you said, I thought Brito was definitely winning the fight. But, man, what a nasty cut. And, that was caused, just from a kick. That caused that much damage and that much of a split. When the referee put his finger in his leg, I almost passed out. It was pretty gruesome and it was pretty crazy. But, all, credit to, Brito. I think in the prelims, I wasn't, coming away from any great fights. I think I was more surprised and more impressed by a lot of the great performances. There was a lot of great performances by a lot of good up-and-coming fighters. Marcio Ruffy, I thought he looked great in his performance. Alessandro Costa, Orbalali, Drakkar Klose, Ismail Bonfin. I thought all those guys looked great, and I think some of those guys may warrant either a ranked fighter or are going to be on their way for fighting for a ranked position pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I want to talk about the Orlobali versus Elvis Brenner fight real quick. Orlobali was in complete control of the first 2 rounds, won the first 2 rounds, and the third round had an immediate point deduction for grabbing the fence on the first occasion as well. Now, we are in Brazil. He was fighting a Brazilian fighter. We had a Brazilian referee, so I don't know if there's a little home cooking there. But, the very first time he did grab the fence was deducted a point in that third round. And if Brenner would have won that third round, which he was winning, up until, he made a similar mistake to Steve Erceg we were talking about, went for a takedown, got reversed, was getting controlled on the ground the entire fight, tried to fight at that guy's game the last 30 seconds while he was winning and landing big shots on the feet, ends up getting reversed and loses on the scorecards. I thought that it was a big mistake by Brenner. I thought that he could have fought his way into a draw there, especially after the point deduction. Were you kind of surprised that they did take a point that fast? And what did you make of that third and final round? There was a lot of controversy and, a lot on the line there in that final 5 minutes.
Yeah, I would like to hope that they give you a warning first, and then maybe the second or third time they deduct the point. But for them to deduct the point that quick, I thought that was pretty irrational. I was kind of upset with the referee for doing that. And, thank God it didn't cost him the fight. And thank God, Orlobali was able to rebound and, come away with the win. Because like you said, if he doesn't win that round, he's going to lose that fight. I think he's a real good up-and-comer as well. I don't want to see him fight a ranked fighter next, but he's definitely going to be, a tough guy and a tough outing for anybody. And, thank God that didn't cost him the fight because I think he warrants that victory. And I was impressed by both fighters because, I thought both fighters did look good in that fight. I thought that was probably the best fight in the prelims as well. But, I'm glad that Orlobali got the win.
Yeah, and I thought irrational, the word you used, irrational, was a great way to describe it because what the referee really did there was basically take out the first 10 minutes of the fight that Orlobali was controlling. Because when he takes that point deduction, and then if Brenner would have somehow won that round, that's a 10-8 round to the 10-9s that Orlobali had put together in back-to-back. I just thought that the point deduction was too soon. He should have given one warning, and it just took too much away in that fight and made someone who had no chance of winning maybe sneak backdoor into a draw. It just I didn't really like how that decision was made, but I like what you were saying about Mauricio Ruffy. That was really impressive. Malarkey has been knocked out a couple times in the past by Jalen Turner, amongst others, but he hangs tough with some of the best. Malarkey's faced top-level competition. He's been down the road in the UFC and, seen the very best. And this guy Ruffy comes in there and stops him, in relatively, short order. And, that was really impressive. So I want to see Ruffy maybe get another step up in competition. Lightweight's stacked, so I don't think he's going to get a ranked fighter immediately. But he beat a guy from AKA who was, Islam Makhachev's camp in his Dana White Contender Series, and he handled him really well too. So I think the sky's the limit for him. He might be the next Brazilian star there at 155 pounds.
Yeah, and I think they're going to take their time slowly. He's still young. I'm pretty sure he's around 27 years old. So he's still got time to, improve. Maybe give him a year or two, just to slowly, get better. Slowly build up the guys he's fighting. And I think in a couple of years we'll be seeing him contend for a ranked position.
Yeah, and when you come in and beat a guy like Jamie Malarkey that early in your UFC career, it really puts the rest of the division on notice that, you're a legitimate contender and people are going to have to be worried about your hands. So, Malarkey is a tough customer. I don't know where to go here for him. He's on a bit of a losing streak. And he's fought well against some guys. Like, he hung tough against Jalen Turner when that fight was going on, then got caught with a straight left and it was over. He's a good gauge to see where the rest of the division's at and some of these new guys coming in. But, I don't want to see anybody get released, but Jamie Malarkey's been, stopped a lot of times in the last 2 years. So, he may be the end of the road for his UFC career, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it seems like that's where I might be heading. And, unfortunately, we don't have a pay-per-view card next week, but we do have a stacked UFC fight night. I think fight night in St. Louis next week is one of the better fight nights that you'll see. I know we're going to preview it on Wednesday, but before we get out of here, what is exciting you and what stands out to you about the fight card in St. Louis next week?
Yeah, I actually brought tickets to it. I'm a Midwest fight fan here. I live in Champaign, Illinois, so I'm a little less than 2.5 hours away from St. Louis. So I got tickets to it. I'll be sitting in section 110. I'm really excited. The main event, I think Derek Lewis gets back on track against Nascimento. Nascimento's 11-1, but he's going to have to deal with some punching power he's never seen before this weekend. I don't see these heavyweights going 5 rounds either. I think Derek Lewis probably gets it done by knockout if he can stay off the ground. And Derek Lewis just fought Almeida, and didn't get submitted for 5 rounds. And we know how good Almeida is with the submission. So, I'm interested for that. But honestly, who I'm most interested for is Robelis de Spain. We've been talking about this guy since his debut. 15-second average fight time. Comes in and gets a knockout in 18 seconds in his UFC debut. Broke the UFC reach record at 80. He was 84 inches, now 87 inches. Robelis de Spain, 6'7", former Taekwondo medalist in the Olympics. I think this guy is on the up and is going to be the next big striker in the UFC's heavyweight division. I can't wait to see him fight guys like Alexander Volkov and Jairzinho Rozenstruik and some of these other elite strikers. He takes on Waldo Acosta-Cortez this weekend. Cortez used to be a professional baseball player. He's got a big right hand and a good record at 12-1, but he's going to be facing one of the biggest freaks I've seen in my time watching this. I just haven't seen a guy been able to go in there and knock people dead in 10 seconds like Robelis is able to do. He's an absolute freak of nature.
Yeah, I bet that's going to be awesome to see his size in person live. And there's definitely not a fighter that I'm definitely going to be more excited to see on this card. We're definitely going to explain and talk about it more and give our prediction on Wednesday. One fight that I want to mention before we get out of here, I'm real excited for the Alonzo Midfield versus the Carlos Elberg fight. I think both these guys are great upcoming light heavyweights, and I'm torn on who I'm going to pick in this fight. I think this fight could go either way. I think Alonzo Midfield is unbelievable, but I think Carlos Euberg is one of the best unranked light heavyweights in the world right now, and this fight can go either way. There's about 6 or 7 fights that are very interesting, and I can't wait to break it down on here on Wednesday.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about Ruzabov and Buckley in the co-main. That's going to be, awesome as well. 2 finishers there. So I like what you're saying. I think this is one of the best fight night cards we've seen in a minute. Before we get out of here real quick, did you watch Canelo versus Munguia at all last night?
I caught a little bit of the recap, yeah.
Yeah, Canelo looked good. I think he's ready for David Benavidez and some of the top guys right now. Munguia also, to me, looked like someone who wasn't scared. He walked down Canelo for a lot of that fight, but he took some big punches, got knocked down in the early rounds of the fight as well, but fought through it and went to the decision. For me, Munguia is just too inexperienced. It reminded me a little bit of Floyd Mayweather versus Canelo back in the day when Canelo was fighting, the face of boxing at 20 years old, but just didn't have the experience to compete with Floyd. Munguia looked like a guy with the right tools, the right experience, and the right trainer down the road could find himself into another world title situation, but it was just a little too much too soon for the young Mexican contender in Munguia. In my opinion.
100%. I agree. I think that's why coming to this fight, I really didn't give him a chance to beat Canelo because of the experience. Canelo's in his prime and is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. But I think at this point, the only guy that's left for him to fight is Benavidez. I think that's the fight to make. Those are by far the 2 best guys in the weight class. Benavidez is a killer coming up in the division. He's probably one of the top 10 or 15 best pound-for-pound fighters as well himself. And I can't wait to see that fight. Hopefully they can get that fight at the end of the year. Heard rumors it might be September, October. And that's a fight that I definitely, pay to see, and I'm definitely excited for.
Yeah, and they actually just announced a big card coming up with Frank Martin and Gervonta Tank Davis as the main event, but they've got Benavidez fighting on that card. I can't remember the opponent's name that Benavidez is matched up against in that one, but I believe he's a big favorite, and they're trying to set him up with that matchup for Canelo. But he's actually the co-main event coming up on the Tank Davis versus Frank Martin, and I really like what boxing's doing in making these deeper cards here. I think boxing is really making a comeback in 2024. We just saw Haney and see Usyk and Fury again this month as well. That's something to look forward to. So boxing fans are certainly getting what they're asking for in deeper cards. And more respectable main and co-main events.
Yeah, and I can't wait to break it all down on Wednesday, and I can't wait to see what this year in boxing has in store for us.
Thanks for joining us, fight fans. We'll catch you on Wednesday and break down this UFC Fight Night card from St. Louis. Thanks, Anthony.
See ya.